point. All right, so cell, right? Cell is the basic unit of life, right? It's the smallest thing that's considered living that can survive and reproduce. Okay, and we did talk about the characteristic that you need to be considered living, right? Like energy, respond to the environment, reproduce, grow, and develop, right? We talk about all those things. Remember, we talk about those things. So hopefully you review for your final soon. And then we said prokaryotes are very simple. Bacteria would be an example of prokaryote. They don't have a nucleus. They do have DNA. They do have genetic information, but their genetic information are just flowing around inside the cell like this, right? They're just flowing around. They're not compacted like eukaryote, right? Eukaryote are bigger and more complex, and their nucleus are compacted, condensed into this giant ball of genetic information, right here. They also have organelles. Example would be animal, and plant are example of eukaryotes, arctic cell. Organelles. Speaking of organelles, so again, eukaryotic cell have organelles. Organelles are organs, little organ of the cell, just kind of like us having organ in our body. Organelle will be little organ of the cell. Okay, and then the cell is also made of cytoplasm, right? And remember, cytoplasm is just the fluid of the cell, right? If this bottle of water represents a cell, the cytoplasm is like the fluid, the water. Okay, so hopefully you remember. Cyto means cell, plasm is like fluidy. That's the root word. All right, today we're going to talk about those cell organelles, and hopefully you guys did your worksheet, and hopefully some of these ring a bell and you're like, oh, okay, I remember now. Okay, cell membrane. The first thing we need to talk about is the cell membrane. Every cell have a cell membrane. If you are prokaryote or you eukaryote, you all have a cell membrane, a surrounding, and this surrounding of the cell are made of lipid. If you guys remember, lipid is fat, and this is why we need to have fat. Our cell need fat to create a membrane for a cell. The cell membrane is also called plasma membrane too, by the way. Sometimes you hear people call it plasma membrane as well. Okay, so our cell membrane are made of fat, specifically this fat called phospholipids. There's different type of fat. Phospholipid is one type. Okay, phospholipid is this. You guys look at the screen, you see this little circular head, and they also have two long tail, right? So it's kind of like if you take your hand, this would be like the phospholipid head, and if you put out two fingers, that'll be the tail. So this is phospholipid that make up your cell membrane. All right. Okay. The head is considered hydrophilic. Hydrophilic means it loves water. That means when you put a fat cell or phospholipid inside the water, this part of the phospholipid will always face the water because it loves water. But the tail, the two tail that it has, is hydrophobic. That means it doesn't like water. So when you put fat into water, the tail always try to hide away from the water. So how does the tail protect itself from water? Well, instead of one layer, if you just have one layer, then the tail will also interact with water. The head also interact with water. But you gotta remember, the tail doesn't like water. So how does it protect itself? It needs to combine with another layer, right? So that way, the tail are interact with each other instead of water. So that's why when you put fat, any oil droplets into water, it always come together into this surrounding membrane, right? If you ever remember, if you put any type of fat, oil, wax, whatever, into water, they all come together in a round membrane. And that's because they have this characteristic where the tail do not like water. So it always combine, all right? And they always have two layers because one layer, the tail will be exposed to water. So when you have two layers, they protect each other. And that's what the characteristic that give us the cell membrane, right? Or plasma membrane. The cell membrane has other characteristic. It has a characteristic called semipermeable. Semipermeable means semi mean half, permeable mean permit. The cell membrane permit things in and let things go out, but it doesn't permit everything to go in. It doesn't permit everything to go out. It only permit things that can pass through a membrane. If it's small enough, then it can go through a membrane. If it's too big, it cannot. It's kind of like thinking of like a volleyball net, right? The marble and the BB pellets and the ping pong ball can go through, but the tennis ball and the basketball cannot. And that's kind of like what we call semi-permeable half. And this is important because you don't want everything to go through your cell membrane, right? Because including toxin, dangerous stuff. You want them to be able to allow things to go in and keep things out, right? And that's the characteristic of a cell membrane. Now we're gonna move on to the other part of a cell. The first thing we want to talk about is the nucleus. We did mention the nucleus last time. When you look at a cell under the microscope, you tend to see the nucleus right away, because it tends to be the biggest part inside a cell. The job of the nucleus is like the control center of a cell. Think of it as like if the school is the cell, the administrator office where the principal and the vice principal are, they kind of like the nucleus. They control what's going on in the cell. All right. The nucleus also have holes to allow genetic information to move in and out, nutrient to go in and out. This is where you hold all the DNA in a eukaryotic cell. Remember, eukaryotic cell have nucleus. Prokaryotic cell don't have nucleus. Okay, so keep that in mind. So that's the nucleus, control center. The next organelle we want to talk about is called the mitochondria. The mitochondria, you gotta remember, is the site where animal and plant have, and this is where you make energy. This is animal cell, by the way, because it look round. Plant cell look like a box, and there's a reason why it look like a box, and we'll explain that later toward the end of the note. Plant have mitochondria as well. And remember, mitochondria is where cell respiration takes place. The second steps in cell respiration. It's called the Krebs cycle, remember? It's like a cycle that produces energy and electron compound. It's like a fuel to run the third step. All right, and that's mitochondria. The next cell respiration, the next organelle that we want to talk about is called Endoplasmic Reticulum. Right? Try to say it out loud and you hear that it's pretty interesting. The words sound interesting. Endoplasmic Reticulum, or we call them ER. There are two types. Endoplasmic Reticulum.
Sorry.
No problem.
Did you get your Flickr problem figured out?
Oh no, so I forgot. I left my laptop, my MacBook at home, so I use it.
Okay.
But I sent a work order in. So we'll. Are you?
You keep talking.
Okay. Okay. So there are two types of endoplasmic reticulum, right? On the vocab list, the first type is what we call the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Okay. I put a work order in, so hopefully they'll come by. Yeah.
I'm doing the work order myself.
Oh, okay. So this is the wire that connect in, but again,
Did they give you a new cable to your Exotron, to your Provo?
No, it's the same. So this is the old cable right here. Yeah.
That's what the problem is.
Oh, that is?
The old brake cable, it's a cable problem.
It go to sleep, right?
Right.
When it
think it's you unplug the Exotron, everything works out. You keep
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, buddy.
No problem. So you have the smooth ER, right? The smooth ER is right here. You can see from the picture here. It's kind of like, it's smooth because it looks smooth. It's not rough. And the smooth ER, its job is to build lipids. And how do I remember that smooth make lipids? Because if you have a few fats, they smooth, right? Fat is smooth. And that's how I remember my cell as well, is that smooth ER build lipids or fats. And also carbohydrate, carbs, right? Remember the 4 macromolecule? that make up all the living things. And then the second type of ER is what we call rough ER. It is rough because of these little dots right here. And its job is to store. So you can circle this word or highlight this word when you read your note. Again, store. It store protein. It store protein because it contains these little dots, and these little dots are what we call ribosome. We'll talk about ribosome next. So the rough ER are normally found right near the nucleus. And there's a reason for that, and we'll come back to that later on when we talk about genetic. But the rough ER are often found around the nucleus, and then the smooth is further out, okay? And that's the ER, smooth and rough. In your vocab list, make sure you write the definition for both smooth and rough as well. All right, the next organelle that we want to mention that's very important is the ribosome, right? The ribosome are these little dots on the rough ER. It also free floating. That means it's also flowing around the cell. Ribosome job is to make protein. So ribosome is the factory, the thing that make up protein. It's tiny little dots, but they have very important role. They make protein. So that way the cell can grow and that organism can grow. The next thing is Goji Apparatus. Name sound funny, right? But its job is kind of like FedEx or UPS or Amazon Prime. Their job is to package and they transport protein out of the cell. The protein will go to wherever your body needs, okay? Is this thing right here. Its job is to package like a vesicle, like a surrounding thing. These little blue dot would be protein, and this vesicle will attach to the plasma membrane. You gotta remember the plasma membrane means cell membrane. They will attach to it and they will release the protein out of the cell. So that way that protein can go to wherever the body needs. And this is the job of the Goji apparatus. It's like FedEx, right? FedEx, package and transport. All right, the next organelle is the lysosome. You gotta remember your root word. Lys means to cut. This guy is kind of like the sanitary district. You gotta remember I think every Tuesday or Thursday, you have the trash people come and pick up your recycle bin and trash and bring it back to the sanitary district and recycle them. And this guy, that's his job. In the cell, there are things that are broken, that are worn out. This is the guy that fixes them, break them up. So that way you have material to build new things. And that's the lysosome, right? So pretty interesting, right? They have job that kind of like real human have, right? The next thing is the cytoskeleton. You gotta remember the root word. Cyto means cell. Skeleton is just a skeleton, all right? Well, your cell, individual cell also have skeleton. They are called cytoskeleton. Their job is to allow to give the cell the support. Without the skeleton, it will just crumble. But with the skeleton, it allows the cell to stay inflated pretty much. It also allows organelles to move around. It moves different organelles around, so they don't just stay in one place. Just imagine, right? Your cell has water, so these organelles move around. They don't just stay in one place, okay? And that's the cytoskeleton. All right, so we've been talking about all these organelles that plant have, animal also have. Animal have, plant also have. But now we're gonna move on to a few things that plant have, but the animal don't have. And the first thing is a cell wall, right? Animal and plant have cell membrane. Remember we talked about cell membrane in the beginning? But plant have an additional wall to give it support, like an armor, to give it an armor, right? So that is why plant cell, when you look under the microscope, they look like a box because they have a wall. The wall allows them to have additional defense. This is why we take a baseball bat outside and we hit on the tree. The tree don't die right away, right? And you can't do that to another animal, right? Because the tree Plant cell have cell wall to make it tough. But in turn, it keep the plant very rigid. The plant cannot be flexible like animal or human. They can't run around, right? Unless they Groot. But we know that, Guardian, is it Guardian Galaxy? Groot? Yeah. It's not realistic, right? But anyway, so plant have cell wall. Animal don't have it. Besides cell wall, plant also have this giant structure called vacuole. Animal have vacuole too, by the way, guys. Animal do have vacuole, but plant have a giant vacuole. What is the function of a vacuole? Well, its job is to store food, water, waste, and color pigment. The plant shrink or swell up depending on how full the vacuole is. The reason they have to store water because they can't move, right? Because remember, they trade their flexibility with armor, right? Plant have a cell wall, so they don't move. So when there's a chance that they collect a lot of water, like raining, they make sure they have something to store a lot of water. Animal, on the other hand, when we're thirsty, we don't have to store a lot of water. We move to the location that have water because we can be flexible. So there you go. That's a trade-off of having an armor like a cell wall, is that you cannot move. So then other part of your organelle have to accommodate that, okay? And that's vacuole. All right, the last thing the plant have, the animal don't have, is chloroplast. If you guys remember chloroplast, right? These are the green organelles. A job is to do photosynthesis for the plant. Remember that? Animal don't have that because we don't do photosynthesis, right? Unless you're the Hulk. The Hulk is green. He must have chloroplast. But we don't know. Right? That's why he have extra energy. Okay? Moving on. So, anything that animal have, you notice, plant also have. Some stuff that plant have, animal don't have. So keep that in mind. Like cell wall, chloroplast, big vacuole, for example. Plant have it, animal don't have it. Okay? It's pretty good being a plant. They can do a lot of things. Only thing is they cannot be flexible. All right, moving on. We said eukaryotic cell can be multicellular, right? Prokaryotic cell, they tend to be just one cell. But we know that animal and plant cell are not just one cell. They combine to work together. When they combine to work together, we say that they are specialized. They have a special job. And when they combine to work together, they become a tissue, right? Cell become tissue. And when those tissue come together, it become an organ. Think of a heart. You have heart cell, multiple heart cells specialized to come work together. They become a heart tissue. And those heart tissue come and make up a heart. It become an organ. So keep that in mind. An example of a specialized cell would be your liver cell. They work together to detoxify blood, clean out your blood. Sperm cell, right, for male, they work together to pass on the DNA of that person, of that man, to the egg cell, which is for female. Okay. So what are some advantages of being pro and euc? Well, pro are very simple, easy to grow. They don't require a lot of things because they're so small. They reproduce very fast all the time as well. Eukaryotic, on the other hand, are more complex, so they can have different jobs. So that means they can combine together to be multicellular. And they can build larger body. They can become bigger organism instead of just a cell.